Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for the title. It used to be a slogan or a saying, publish or perish. I'll talk about publishing or writing. I'll talk about perishing. And then the conjunction in the middle, somewhere along the line, I'm going to change it. I'm supposed to remain 7 seconds on this, so I will read it. I have no disclosures to declare with respect to this presentation. A couple of years ago, with Moshe Shine and John Varden, who was editor-in-chief of the British Journal of Surgery at the time, we published a chapter in the book about medical writing, and we came up with 2 categories of reasons why we should or why we do publish. The altruistic are well known. We've heard about this. It's to disseminate knowledge. It's to disseminate knowledge about the research that we do, clinical research, investigations in the lab. It's to disseminate knowledge about our experience, and then finally, to take better care of our patients. But I'm going to concentrate now on the personal or the egoistic reasons why we write or why we publish. Not so much about being famous or developing professional contacts, but the academic or professional promotion, financial gain, and institutional reasons. Climbing the academic ladder is something more than just an expression. We know that we have to do that for an academic career. And in some countries, we do it with gradings and sometimes awards that come from what we publish. But it depends on where the paper is published, how important the journal is that we publish in. For instance, what is the impact factor or its journal rank? How many times that paper is cited, and we have several indexes out there, and coming up very strong, I'm sure, are going to be the social media indexes as well. The financial gain is something that we have to think about. It's not exactly the same for everybody writing, and in all countries. Certainly, you write, you get a promotion, you acquire fame, you're well published, and it may lead to a better job and to a better paid position. And in some countries, there is a financial incentive. I'm going to talk about this now. In France, we have a system which is called the CGAPS. It's set up recently, and it takes advantage, it's an incentive to do clinical trials and to publish them. During the clinical trial, you get points for a multi-center study, 10, or a monocenter study, 5. These bonuses are doubled if it's a phase 1 or a phase 2 trial. The point is worth a little bit more than 3,000 euros. For example, if your center is a promoter of a multi-center biomedical research trial, it will get 3,590 euros a year during 3 years. That's a lot of money. It's a good incentive. But there's even more. There's an incentive for the amount of patients that we include. Also doubled in phase 1 and phase 2 trials. The point is worth a little bit more than 200 euros, and depends on how many patients you include. You can get also somewheres up to 30, 33, 35,000 euros, once again, per year for 3 years. And then for the investigator, the number of investigators counts also. There are points for that. In the United States, I know that there are institutions that give stipends, sometimes as little as $10, but sometimes as high as $200 or $300, every time a paper is cited, coming from that institution. That is an incentive. In other countries, there's also incentives. I'm sorry, it's very small, you can't see, but on the top of that list, you have China. And then you have Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, Malaysia, Taiwan. All these countries have systems that give money to institutions that publish in high-quality journals. And on the bottom, on the left, you see the rankings for several journals. When you have publish in a journal in China, when you publish in a journal that has an impact factor of 5 or greater, these are the sums of money that the institution will get. It's not an individual person that gets the money, it's the institution that gets the money. And this is a very high encouragement to publish. But publishing is one thing. There are dangers. In academia, for students, if research isn't publishable, you may have a difficult time finding a good job. If you're a member of faculty, you know that publications are necessary to build your tenure and get a good job and keep it. And for established researchers, your publishing is very important. Publishing in a prestigious journal is very important because you want to have funding, and your university position depends heavily on the funding that you can get. There are dangers also for the universities and the journals. The universities are under budgetary pressures. They need prestige in highly prestigious journals to attract research funding. And journals are facing with increasing numbers of publications, of submissions, with the operating costs that go with it to process them, and the pressure to maintain that prominence with high impact scores and other measures of perceived rank. Finally, we come to the possibility that all this might lead to misconduct. And you see a list there of several things that I'm going to talk about, one after the other. Multiple authors, changing the order of authors, everybody knows about that. But something that is very important, I think, and I want to emphasize, is that we should not engage ghostwriters when we publish. There are many ghostwriters out there. It's a business. Some of these people do it very well. I'm not saying it's all bad, but it has more disadvantages than advantages. It leads to misconduct in research, to plagiarism, and I'm going to talk about some of the examples as they come up. Plagiarism. Well, here are two examples of very, very famous people, but at their time, plagiarism was not that bad. You could do it. They did it very liberally. I'm not going to reveal the names of these two abstracts or summaries out of two very prominent papers of a very prominent institution. I'm not going to go any further, but just start reading them, go from left to right, and you can see that this is flagrant plagiarism, except for the last line. At the time these papers were published, plagiarism,
not from the same
same institution,
the same authors.
Not the same authors, but the names are the same someplace along the line. Anyhow, what I want to say here is that plagiarism was not something that was a crime or anything like that, but today, these authors would never get away with this. Today, when you submit a paper, it goes through software that looks for words that are repeated, words that have already been published, and the chain of words, in other words, the order of certain words. And you get a paper back, you submit a paper, and in 48 hours you get this result of that software saying that, well, that chain of words on the first line of this study was to evaluate the safety and efficacy of laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy has been cited 59 times in our journal already. They don't want it. You get a percentage of all the words that you're copying, and they want to get that percentage below a certain threshold, which is usually around 10 to 15%. Duplicate publication. Here's an example. I've taken the names away. I'm not going to say where they're from, but they're the same authors, the same data, and it's been published 3 times, practically within 24 months. This is not correct. And it can be even something very, let's say, malicious. Here are 2 papers, one in English, one in Italian, about exactly the same population of patients, exactly the same number of complications, exactly the same number of deaths. And one paper to the other, they did, was it a mistake? Was it intentional? The denominator is not the same. Obviously, the percentages are not the same. So if you use this information from one or the other publication for a meta-analysis, for instance, the information is not going to be the same. Another demeanor is salami slicing. Now, there's 2 sorts of salami slicing. One is to have a population, and you publish about that population, taking only 20 here, 50 here, 25 here. 3 publications on the same population, but you're looking at different things. Is it okay? Well, it might be, if you do it correctly. But there's another sort of salami slicing, and that is publishing about 10 patients, and then publishing about 20 patients when you have 10 patients more, and then 30 patients when you have another 10 patients. That's 3 publications, but don't forget, that 3rd publication includes 20 patients that have already been published in another paper, and 10 patients that have already been published twice in 2 other papers. If you're going to do a meta-analysis on that, you're going to have 2/3 of that population that's going to be counted more than once. There are examples all over with very famous authors, but at that time, salami slicing, once again, was something that people did not care about or did very little about. I'm here to say that we have to be aware of that and be very careful about that. Salami slicing may be okay if the add-on, is at least 50% of the original population. The consequences can go even worse. First of all, from the scientific point of view, duplicate and add-on publications have, as I have alluded to, raised concerns about copyright, ethical conduct. The reputation of the author is at stake. It's a waste of valuable resources, and as I said, can cause problems for researchers, especially those who want to conduct meta-analyses. Another consequence, perhaps not that serious yet, but still for your reputation, yes, is a retraction, an official retraction. You get your name in print because you've done something wrong and you have to retract your article. And electronically today, every time you want to find that article, electronically you will be reminded that article has been retracted. But we're getting even worse. There are papers, publications. I'm going to cite one about a drug that was taken off the market that was working very, very well, called Vioxx. And why? Because people started having cardiac problems, and when they looked into the data, there was no cardiac problems. How was that? Well, it was because a ghostwriter was the person responsible for that, and the data was not given to him. So you see, this can go very, very seriously into a wrong direction. Now we're getting to something that's even worse. I'm sure you were aware of the Nobel Prize that was given to this eminent scientist, because he did do a lot of good things. But when we found out that his research was falsified, he was arrested. You see him being arrested. And he was taken to jail. Another example, much more sad, is of a Brazilian anesthesiologist, a brilliant medical researcher and clinician, who published papers about the use of high-dose mannitol for head injury. 3 of his publications were called into question, and neither the co-authors or the editors knew anything about it. This person was invited to talk about his mannitol in congresses, practically week after week. And what happened? He committed suicide because he was living with a lie and could not longer live with that lie. So, publish or perish. You've seen the good side. You've seen the bad side. You have to decide. I'm sure you all have decided on the right side. Thank you for your attention.